Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This morning's learning is sponsored by Hannah and Robert Klein in memory of Lisa Leon Livracha. Should be a schus for neshama. Thank you very much to the Kleins. Okay, beginning with chapter 19, verse 1. Chapter 19, verse 1. So the angels came to Avram and Sarah. They told them they were going to have a child. Sarah, we were discussing yesterday the laughter of Sarah, what exactly that means, and Avram confronts her. But onwards with the story. So two of the angels proceed to Stom in the evening. Lot is there in the gate. Lot sees them. He gets up to greet them. And he bows to them. Verse 2. Come to your servant's house, sleep over. You'll wash your feet, and then you can get up in the morning and keep on going. They said to him, no thanks, we'll sleep in the street. Verse 3, Lot pressed them very much. He really pressured them. They kept on asking them, they should come to his home. And they went his way, they came to his house. He made for them, let's translate mishteh as a feast. Certainly, at the very least, mishteh means he gave them what to drink. Maybe that's the better way to translate. He gave them what to drink. Let's say he gave them drinks. Umatzos afa vayochelu. And he baked matzahs and they ate. It's clear that Lot is applying the lessons he learned at the home of Avram Avinu. And it's Avram, we know, was very big on Achnas Sorechim and bringing in guests. We saw that at the beginning of the parsha. And Lot is clearly taking a page from Avram's book. What's so interesting to think about is the angels were pretty amenable to being guests in Avram's tent. Why are they so disinclined to be guests to Lot? Just an interesting thing to think about. He has to really push them that they should come. Avram, there's no word like Vayiftzar with Avram and the angels. So why does Lot need such a word? Ramban on Pasuk Gimel, Vayiftzar ba ma'od. Haya lelot schus ba'aftziro bohem. This is a mitzvah for Lot. That this was a merit for him, that he pressed them that they should come. V'haya lo chayfetz tov ba'achnosas orchim. And he really wanted to do good. He wanted to bring in guests. Kidei lizakoso, a very interesting Ramban. The Ramban says, the city of Stom is about to be destroyed. Okay, Lot hopefully is going to be safe from the city of Stom. He needs some merits. So the Ramban says the reason why they made it so difficult for him to have them is because if they keep on saying no, then every time he keeps on coming back and says, oh, come on, it's increasing his merit. And that's a good thing for him at this crossroads. Avram Avinu was not at a dramatic time in terms of the city being destroyed, and Avram Avinu had a whole lot more merit in his account than Lot does. V'lachein shamu lo besof, and therefore, because he kept on pressing them and to give him merit, they ultimately listened to him. Ki mitchila lo hayu rotzim lavo lebei. So truth be told, they didn't want to go to his house originally. Ki eino tzaddik tamim. He wasn't such a righteous person. So that's the real distinction, says the Ramban. Avram, tzaddik, how could you say no to Avram? Right? Lot's no tzaddik, so they weren't interested. And now the Ramban just points out that the more he had to work to get them to come, they actually increased his merits. For Abu Sein Ramru, the rabbis teach Mesarvim Lekatan Bein Mesarvim Legadol, that if a distinguished person wants you to do something, you don't turn him down. If it's not such a distinguished person, you do turn him down. So therefore, they're conducting themselves in a manner that was appropriate. But to Avram, you don't say no. Okay. Sforno on Pasuk Gimel. This is an interesting thing to think about. Avraham didn't give them mishteh. In other words, he took some milk for them. Mishteh connotes wine. So if Lot is being so hospitable in the context of what he learned from Avram Avinu, why it seems like he's outdoing Avram here. What's the story with that? So very interesting. Sforna on Pasuk Gimel, Mishteh, Kviyu Suda Alayayin. He sort of based a meal around wine. V'yos Hayayin Ahuv Etzlo. Lot was a big fan of wine. Kamosho Chiach Sofa Tchilaso, right? The whole story with his daughters giving him to drink until he doesn't know what's going on, and then having sexual relations with him. It's pretty apparent from that story that Lot enjoyed wine. Avraham lo asa mishta. There is no such thing as meals based around wine for Avram Avinu, except zulasi b'yom higamelas yitzchak l'gdolei hador. When he celebrated the weaning of Yitzchak, so the par for the course in the community was to offer wine, so he did it. But Avram wasn't in Avram's own life. He wasn't so excited by wine. Lot was very excited by wine, so therefore it's appropriate for Lot to have wine. Just an interesting distinction. Okay, now let's go on to the Ramban on Pasuk Hey. And the Ramban on Pasuk Hey tries to get a handle a little bit on what was the story with Sodom anyway, that they deserved to be destroyed. The city deserved to be miraculously destroyed and the residents killed, except for a few exceptions. Very, very striking. So if you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Hey, we're going to pick up in the middle of the Ramban. It's about 10 lines into the Ramban, beginning with the words V'aldas Rabosenu. V'aldas Rabosenu, the Gemara teaches, Hayu bohem kol midos ros. They had all kinds of bad character traits in Sodom. Aval nigmar dinam al oso avon mibnei shelo hichziku yad ani ve'evyon. But the sin that really brought it home, that God said they deserved to be destroyed, was that when there was an impoverished person in Sodom, they had no interest in helping him. That was a more regular offense for the people of Sodom than any of the other negative things that are taught about them, that they really were not interested in. When people had needs, people had financial needs, they weren't interested in helping. Not only, says the Ramban, or he's explaining the Gemara, not only is it just such a bad thing to not help people in need, but among other nations, it's a very common thing. You help people if they need help. So it was A, something they were guilty of a lot in Sodom, but B, was so unbecoming and so beyond the pale in terms of negative character that's why they were destroyed in the end. V'da, you should know. Ki mishpat Sodom hayalamalas Eretz Yisrael. A really interesting thing to think about. The Ramban says this fact that Sodom is being held to this account and is even being destroyed is because of the fact that Sodom was in the land of Israel. And there's great expectations in the land of Israel. Ki michlal nachlas Hashem ve'ena sovelas anshe toevos, like we had so many times elsewhere in Chumash. The land of Israel is this special place associated with God, and the land doesn't tolerate people who conduct their lives in an abominable manner. V'kasher takias agoy kulo b'bnei toavosam hikdima v'koasa esa am hazeh shayu roy mikulam lashamayim v'labrios. So before we have later on in history in the land of Israel that God will expel the various nations from the land of Israel to give it to the Jews, because as God says in the Chumash, they did Avodah Zarah and the like. Before all of that, Sodom was just so beyond in terms of the poor character. Sodom were the first ones to be not just expelled, but destroyed, because they were doing these terrible things in the land of Israel. Because since they had this good land that God had given them, they were so haughty. God wanted that this should be a sign for people considering inappropriate action down the road. L'Yisrael ho hasidim liyarsha, kasher hisraben gafris v'melach shreifach chol arza, kama pechas stom v'amorad mots v'yim asher afach Hashem ba'po v'chamaso. The dramatic destruction of Sodom. Theoretically, God could have just had them die. Theoretically, God could have expelled them from the land. The dramatic destruction of Sodom is to teach a powerful lesson to the Jewish people for down the road, that we have to Obviously, God always wants us to conduct ourselves in a certain way, but particularly in the land of Israel, the stakes are very, very high. And that's the pasuk. That's the pasuk near the end of Chumash, that if we don't conduct ourselves properly, there'll be terrible destruction, like the destruction of Sodom and Amorah. The Ramban says this is why God destroyed it in such a dramatic way. There are other bad nations in the world. There are other people who do terrible things, even at those times, perhaps, and God didn't punish them in that way. But the reason why they got such a severe punishment is because they were doing all this terrible stuff in the land of Israel. Okay. Let's go on now. Jump far ahead to verse 29. Verse 29. When God destroyed those cities, and Hashem remembered Avraham. And God sent Lot out of the destruction, even though God was destroying cities in which Lot dwelled, Lot was spared. It's clear in the pasuk that Lot was spared because of Avraham. What's that all about? It sounds like Lot didn't deserve to be spared on his own right. But what good are the merits of Avraham to save Lot? I mean, if Lot doesn't deserve to be spared, he shouldn't be spared. So what is it about Avraham and Lot? By the way, Avraham davens a lot for the people of Sodom. That didn't help. But all of a sudden, Lot's saved because of Avraham. Avraham would have loved for everybody to be saved. Rashi on Pasuk Chavtes, Vayizkor Elokim es Avraham, Mauz chiraso shel Avraham Lot. What does it mean when we talk about Lot that God remembered Avraham? Nizkar shayalot yodea shesara ishto shel Avraham. There's remembering here that Lot knew that Sarah was Avram's wife. V'shama she'amar Avram b'Mitzrayim al Sarah achosihi v'lo gila hadavar shehaya chas alav. When Avram, Sarai, and Lot come to Egypt, Avram says, yeah, Sarai, she's my sister. And Lot kept his mouth shut. Lefichach, chas HaKadosh Baruch Hu alav. Lot had compassion for Avram and Sarai and didn't blow their secret. So now, in reward of that, God is kind to Lot here, even though Lot deserved to be destroyed. That's what Rashi says. Ramban says something different pshat, also an interesting pshat. Ramban on Pasuk Chavtes. Vayizkor Elokim es Avram vayishalach es Lot. Inyan HaKasuv hazeh. The idea over here, ki Lot nischased imatzadik lolechas imo loshet ba'aretz b'asher yelech. V'hu shenemar vayelech ito Lot. When Avram goes on his journey, it says Lot went with him. Ki letzavo shelo halach. Lot made a conscious decision. He wants to go on Avram's path. He wants to accompany him. He wants to experience Avram's experiences. And therefore, all of a sudden, to get saved from the destruction of Sodom, Lot can hold on to the coattails of Avraham. Ki ba'avuro gar b'Sodom. It's only because Lot went on the journey with Avram in the first place that he ended up in Sodom. V'lulei Avram otenu hayu b'charon am moladato. So if Avram had not gone on his journey, Lot would still be in Haran. Lot only ended up in Sodom because he went on this journey with Avram. So how could it be that there's this terrible thing that occurs because Avram listened to the word of God? So it's not that Lot did any great mitzvah per se in this context. It's that indirectly, this will be a punishment for the fact that Avram followed on God's path. Now, another very interesting thing we discussed last week. Avram risked his life to save Lot in that war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Why? So the simple way you understand it is you look out for family, Avram's a person of kindness, etc. The Ramban says that's not the pshat. The pshat is that Avram felt responsible. Avram said to himself, if I wouldn't have gone on this journey, Lot wouldn't be in this mess now. I've got to risk my life to save him. So a very interesting pshat from the Ramban. I just want to point out the only reason Lot is in stone is because he wasn't meshing well with Avram when the whole fight, if you remember from last week's parsha, between the shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Avram. So for the same price, you could say, Lot's in stone. You know why Lot's in stone? Because he really didn't follow Avram as much as he should have. But that's not the perspective we're taking. We're saying that in some way, in some sense, Lot is here because he went on Avram's path, and it can't turn out that way. Can't turn out that he dies because he went on Avram's path. So very interesting thing to think about. So we discussed the different reaction the angels had to Lot and to Avram. We discussed the different serving Lot that Avram gave the angels. We discussed why stone was being destroyed in the first place. And we discussed what merits of Avram help Lot in terms of being saved from destruction of stone.